The first light of dawn crept over the Korean peninsula, bleeding red and gold across the cold horizon. Mist clung to the valleys like a ghostly curtain, shrouding the line that divided north and south. But beneath that mist, movement stirred, deliberate, organized, immense. From the wooded hills, columns of soldiers in dark green uniforms emerged, their boots striking the frozen ground in synchronized rhythm. The metallic hum of engines echoed as armored vehicles rolled forward, their tracks grinding the soil into icy mud. 10,000 North Korean troops were on the move. At a forward observation post, a South Korean lieutenant peered through binoculars, his breath visible in the freezing air. "They're not drilling," he muttered to his radio operator. "This is real mobilization." Within minutes, the report flashed across command channels and reached Seoul's Joint Chiefs of Staff. Alarms blared. The border, silent for months, was now alive with tension. In Pyongyang, high-ranking officers gathered inside a fortified war room beneath Kumsusan Palace. A massive digital map glowed on the wall, tracking the advancing units. General Ri Kyung-soo stood before the display, expression unreadable. His orders were clear: mobilize and hold. Yet the document he received hours earlier bore a chilling note from the Supreme Commander: advance only if provoked. He knew what that meant. One misinterpreted signal, one stray bullet, and the world could ignite overnight. Across the Pacific, analysts in Washington stared at real-time satellite feeds. 10,000 troops, artillery moving, air defenses active, said a voice over the Situation Room line. Are we looking at another war? The Secretary of Defense didn't answer immediately. He just stared at the map and whispered, "If Pyongyang crosses that line, we all burn." Meanwhile, ordinary villagers along the North Korean border watched in silence. Old men in tattered coats, children clutching their mothers' hands. All stood by the roadside as convoys thundered past. No one spoke. The rumble of engines was enough to tell them the winds of history were shifting again. By noon, the world's headlines screamed, 10,000 soldiers at the border. Is war coming? But inside North Korea's command bunker, General Ri simply folded the order in his hands and murmured, "Provocation. We'll find us soon." The border slept no longer. It had awakened, and with it, the storm. Smoke rolled across the grey skies of Donetsk. Oblast as Pokrovsk burned through the night. The thunder of artillery never ceased, each explosion lighting up the shattered skyline for a split second before plunging it back into darkness. Streets once filled with life were now wastelands of rubble and ash. The acrid scent of gunpowder mixed with the stench of fire and dust. Ukrainian forces, exhausted and outnumbered, fought desperately to hold their positions on the western edge of the city. Captain Haritsenko crouched behind a broken wall, gripping his rifle tightly. "They're inside the city limits," came a frantic voice over the radio. "We can't hold much longer." Static followed, then silence. He looked around at his men, their faces smeared with soot, eyes hollow from days without sleep. "We hold the line," he whispered, though he no longer believed it himself. Russian armored columns pushed through the main avenue, their treads crushing debris beneath them. Drones circled overhead, scanning for any sign of resistance. Within minutes, another barrage struck the central square, obliterating what remained of the administration building. A Ukrainian medic dragged the wounded into an underground passageway, where flickering candles barely pierced the darkness. "Pokrovsk is gone," a soldier murmured, staring blankly at the ceiling. By dawn, the last defenders were forced to retreat toward Mirnograd, only to find the town already under siege. The railway station, once a lifeline for supplies and evacuations, lay in ruins. Civilians fled in every direction, clutching whatever they could carry. Mothers screamed for their children as artillery shells whistled overhead. The ground trembled with each impact. News outlets scrambled to verify reports, but communication lines were collapsing. Drones had knocked out relay towers, and journalists on the ground vanished without trace. On global screens, anchors spoke in grave tones. "Pokrovsk has fallen. Mirnograd may be next." In a quiet studio in Warsaw, a military analyst looked straight into the camera. "We're watching the front crumble," he said. "And the world is distracted by Asia. 2 crises, 1 fuse. If they connect, The consequences will be catastrophic. As the smoke spread across the eastern plains, the final radio signal from Mirnograd crackled faintly through static. Position lost. God help us all. And then only silence remained. It began as a whisper in the digital void, a blurred video clip posted anonymously on a dark telegram channel. A man with a familiar gait, broad-shouldered and bald, stepping off a private jet under the African sun. The caption read simply, "The ghost returns." Within hours, the internet exploded. Was Yevgeny Prigozhin alive? Journalists dissected every frame, analyzing the man's posture, voice, and even the shadow angle on the tarmac. Some swore it was him, the former Wagner commander who had supposedly died months earlier in a mysterious plane crash. Others dismissed it as disinformation. But the rumors wouldn't die. They grew, multiplied, and spread like wildfire through encrypted channels, conspiracy forums, and late-night news broadcasts. In Moscow, the Kremlin remained silent. Official spokesman called the story nonsense. Yet intelligence operatives were suddenly redeployed to Africa. Reports surfaced of Wagner convoys moving through Sudan and the Central African Republic, reorganizing under a new command. "He's building something again," said an intercepted communication between two European agents. "He's not gone. He's changing shape." Meanwhile, in Ukraine, frontline soldiers began to receive strange transmissions, coded messages, referencing the chef's table and Operation Revival. Commanders dismissed them as psychological warfare, but unease spread among the ranks. The ghost of Prigozhin had returned, if not in body, then in legend. His name alone was enough to unsettle the battlefield. In a dimly lit apartment in Warsaw, investigative reporter Lena Morozova scrolled through dozens of messages from anonymous sources. One, traced to Mali, claimed to have seen Prigozhin personally directing a weapons shipment. Another provided coordinates to a remote desert base. When she reached out to verify, the line went dead. Hours later, her email was wiped clean. The US and European intelligence communities launched a joint task force to confirm the truth. Facial recognition results came back inconclusive, 85% match. "That's not proof," said the director of the CIA, "but it's close enough to make Moscow nervous." Somewhere in the Sahara, a man watched the news on a flickering screen. He smirked faintly as his image appeared on international television. "Let them wonder," he murmured, lifting a glass of vodka. "A ghost can move more freely than a man." Outside, the desert wind howled. The dead, it seemed, had begun to walk again. The world sat on a knife's edge. Every headline screamed crisis, every news ticker blinked red. North Korea's army still waited, motionless yet menacing. Along the border, and 10,000 soldiers ready to strike. In Eastern Europe, Pokrovsk and Mirnograd were smoldering ruins, their capture echoing through every military command center on the continent. And now, rumors of Prigozhin's return had thrown the geopolitical order into chaos. In Geneva, inside a sealed conference hall surrounded by armed guards, the G20 emergency summit had descended into chaos. Delegates argued across the polished table as translation. Headsets buzzed with overlapping voices. "If North Korea moves, we all move," barked the US Secretary of State. "And what of Europe?" countered the German Chancellor. "You think our people can take another war?" The Russian delegate said nothing, simply watching the storm unfold with cold, silent eyes. At the same hour, deep beneath a military base outside Pyongyang, General Ri Kyong-soo stood before a glowing digital map. Red dots marked the border. Green icons indicated Allied units on standby. His finger hovered over the command console. One order could unleash hell, but his instructions were clear. Advance only if provoked. Outside, the sound of jets preparing for takeoff echoed through the tunnels. The tension was unbearable. Thousands of miles away in Brussels, cyber defense teams worked frantically. A series of massive digital attacks had just crippled banks, power grids and communications networks across Europe and parts of Asia. "It's coordinated," muttered a young analyst. "This isn't random, it's preparation." The realization chilled everyone. In the room, Someone was softening the world before the next strike. In Washington, the president sat in the Situation Room, the glow of screens reflecting in his tired eyes. "If one trigger is pulled anywhere, we're in World War III, he said quietly. Around the table, no one spoke. The silence was heavy with inevitability. Meanwhile, in the skies over the Pacific, U.S. reconnaissance drones captured footage of artillery barrels turning south along the North Korean line. The images were transmitted live to command centers worldwide. The message was clear. The storm was no longer coming. It was already here, waiting for the first spark to ignite it. And somewhere in the chaos, unseen and unnamed hands reached out to strike the match.